Tre Johnson immediately stepped into a role as the go-to guy for Texas as a freshman and quickly asserted himself as one of the best shot makers in the country and in the 2025 draft. He's a 6'5", 6'6" 2 guard who is one of the best scorers in the class and capable of producing points in a few ways, but especially from three. He's as confident as anyone out there and is a big part of how he led one of the toughest conferences we've seen recently in both points and minutes per game. Now, there are some big questions in his ability to create easier looks and finish at the bucket. He hasn't given much defensively, and generally the shot-making 2 guard can be a volatile archetype in the league, but he has a compelling skill set and one that's probably a bit more malleable than it might seem at first. Now, Tre is not only one of the most gifted scorers in the class, but also one of the best three-point shooters, and to me that's his best and most appealing NBA skill. He shot about 40% on nearly 7 attempts a game, or 11.5 per 100 possessions, and this combination of raw confidence, range, and mechanics make him a good bet to shoot it at a high clip in the NBA. He's a big threat off the catch, and while Texas didn't have a ton of playmaking threats or those who drew major attention, he was ready when those drive and kick opportunities came his way, and he played well out of the corners on shakeups and drifts. He also did quite a bit off of movement, and I think a team could tap into this more in the NBA. He had some success on pin downs and dribble handoffs going either direction, and he really stood out in a major way on baseline out of bounds. He did that quite a bit early on, especially when teams weren't as keyed into his abilities and the sets that they were trying to run. But his footwork, organization on the move, and ability to make adjustments in the air shined in a big way. He stood out in transition too, shooting about 44% on threes here, and he almost gets an energy boost when he sees the opportunity is going to be there while running on the wing. Now, he was definitely liable to get a little overzealous with some of these, but he's someone that teams will have to find and not allow an easy look that gets him going, and that confidence to hit big shots and get hot quickly is a huge part of what makes him go and one of the class's most impressive shooters.
20 on the shot clock, 23 to go in the half. Tre Johnson off.
Very consistent 7-7 guy right now in league play at 25 minutes a game.
Corner three finds.
.610 on 6'5" is what Nate Oates decides to go with. What a shifty move by Johnson.
It sure
to
was.
get open.
Johnson transition three. Feeling it. Away. NC State with a turnover. State has given it.
He had blown right by Johnson, but picked up by his teammate. Transition three. Got it!
Yes, sir, right there.
One State thought it was goaltending. All burnt orange the other way. Tre Johnson. Johnson pulls up in transition.
11 freshman from here in Austin leads to the Tre Johnson three. Yes!
Now, the other major piece of Tre's offense is his ability to create his own looks off the bounce and convert at a high rate as a pull-up shooter. He was one of the most effective high-volume shooters off the dribble in the country, especially from three, but he also has some success in the mid-range. He's got a solid handle and has an array of step-backs and side steps that he likes to use to create space. And though there will likely be an adjustment to scoring more in flow in an NBA offense, he still has stretches of scoring on efficient dribbles, whether it's a flyby getting into a three or attacking a closeout to get to a 1 or 2 dribble pull up in the mid-range, or even taking a dribble handoff and getting to his spot quickly. He found some success there. I thought he showed some real upside in the pick and roll too. He showed he could cleanly punish lax coverage and get to his spot and navigate well enough to find good angles to get a shot off, so there are some real pluses there too. And then for someone who isn't super physical or big, his fadeaway game is also advanced. I wouldn't expect him to do a ton of this in the league, but there is some functionality in being able to get to turnarounds off the live dribble and punish smaller guards, and I think it shows his footwork more than anything. So overall, Tre has one of the best combinations of shooting, self-creation on the perimeter, and overall upside as an off-ball threat that the class has. Whether he becomes a star-level shot maker is going to be based on a lot of other factors, so he'll need a certain level of buy-in to do it with less room for error and less raw usage, but the tools for success are there.
Gets a high screen. Be careful. Shake and bake on, and then a fade and fire. Be careful.
Push ahead to Tre Johnson. He wants to shoot it.
Got it!
I'd like to see Pope maybe have a little fire lit underneath it. Johnson. Oh, man.
Years. Johnson over Coleman.
And now Tre Johnson.
Every possession must end with a cut against this help side defense.
Tre Johnson takes the challenge. As you see, in the first 9 games, Clemson pulled off an upset of Kentucky.
Tonight, 5 of 9.
Johnson falling away.
Really attacking switches. Johnson freed himself for
With the drive. Here's Johnson. Free throw line. Nailed it. Boards for Condon. Tre Johnson cut off. Little up and under move. Got it. Curls, a down curl. And Tre Johnson loving it. Got it!
Was that the first one? Here's Tre Johnson with the fadeaway. Good.
And now has a new book coming out. Tre Johnson. Well, that was
Johnson. Rises, fires, and that
this matchup here for Texas. He got size.
Yep. Here's Tre Johnson working on Pettiford. Tries to shoot over it. Got it.
The part of Tre's game I find most interesting to talk about is his upside as a playmaker. Now, he has a ways to go before you're trusting him as like a true secondary creator, and he definitely wants to score the ball first, but I think he'll fit in as a connected piece and should continue to grow from there. He's solid in the pick and roll and can make the basic reads, often hitting the roller with a bounce pass or threading the needle. He can also hit the pop or slip man when he sees two on the ball, and he'll occasionally give you an impressive skip across the court. He's also had some good moments in the open floor and done a good job of creating angles to find dump offs and passes in traffic, and that stuff started to show even more as he got into SEC play. Now, his ceiling here will be based on how well he can touch the paint and draw the defense, which we'll talk about more in a minute, but I liked how he leaned into more of this when the shot wasn't falling, and as long as he's a threat as a shooter, he should command enough attention to make plays in a complementary role, even if he's never the most polished or versatile passer.
now it's Johnson, the skip pass, whipped over to Kaluma. That's in the SEC. Lead it for Johnson, a great look to Kent.
Misses the three, tipped around, and another possession for Texas. Johnson,
Great find. What a feed.
And Tre Johnson get the offensive game going. The vision is there.
Back to the hands of the freshman Johnson. Tough sledding for him. Baseline feed. Kaluma. Shedrick hands it to Johnson. He bangs into Phylon and kicks it. Mark still way off.
Zarek Onyema kicks it outside. A bullet pass inside. Onyema gets spun around.
Backdoor cut for Johnson outside to Mark. How about the vision?
Now, most of the improvement areas for Tre are related to some extent, so we'll touch on all of them individually. But big picture, his reliance on perimeter shot making and struggles to get to and finish at the rim were apparent, and unfortunately, that has been the case since high school. He shot just 54% at the rim overall and 50% in the half court. He got there just about 20% of the time, and the free throw rate was pretty low too, and in some instances it made him one-dimensional. Now, some of it is a product of decision making, but it is also because he doesn't have a great first step. Now, some of it is a product of decision making, but it's also because he doesn't have a great first step. He isn't very powerful with the ball, he has shorter strides, and it's led to a lot of wide angles and then off balance attempts leaning away from the bucket. He's also not very strong or explosive either, and the lack of tools could be limiting for both his finishing and overall ceiling as a scorer. Now sure, there's more than one way to be effective in the league, but you want to take the most efficient and repeatable shots possible that hopefully draw the attention of more than one defender, and in the NBA, it's a lot tougher to be a high-level scorer or high-usage player if you can't get to or finish at the rim in some capacity, or even if you do hit those highest peaks as a shot maker, the consistency probably never gets there enough to be invested in and granted a ton of freedom unless you're just one of the elite shooters in the game. So in Tre's case, his lack of great physical tools and rim pressure make this a real question mark.
Looking for absent. 10 combined turnovers, only 6 combined buckets. Johnson's got it set.
Isolation. Johnson wants it. Johnson crossover. Johnson driving.
The shots aren't coming in a way where Vanderbilt can get offensive rebounds, and that's Kaluma.
Now, I'm not quite as concerned in him as a decision maker because of the situation he was in, but I do think there's reason to question it. There were a lot of wild shots in there he could have done without. He obviously preferred to take the mid-range pull-up in a lot of instances, and even with the lower turnover rate, some of the shots were essentially giveaways. I think in big picture here, and where I think the sort of split is with his evaluation, if you don't think that he can improve enough as a driver and space creator to be like a true second, third type option, you gotta believe in his ability to fit in as an off-ball shooter. Otherwise, he probably doesn't do enough else to be worth picking very high, especially because his biggest improvement area is the defense, which we'll talk about next. Now, I think the shot making is good enough to at least find a role, and because he just turned 19, I think he'll have time to work on the other things as he's on the floor, but that's kind of where the swing is for valuing him as like a clear top 6 guy, or a bit later than that.
4-on-2, but did you see the spacing? Everybody was bunched together.
Broom has got 6. And Kaluma.
Got it to Northweather. Johnson lost the handle. There was
Now lastly, and maybe most importantly, we've got the defense. Now I tried to look at things positively, and I actually thought that he got off to a solid start, but that didn't remain the case, and his lack of resistance and subpar tools are concerning, especially for someone that is more of a score-first threat. On the ball, he just gives up too many advantages. The closeouts were lackluster, the multiple efforts weren't there most of the time, and he'd get caught on screens and just kind of roll with whatever happened after that. And then off the ball, his engagement lacked in a noticeable way. I thought the positioning was mostly fine, and it seemed like he had an initial grasp for where to be, but he was rough as a chaser. He had too many lapses, and even when the engagement was higher, he's not someone that makes plays in passing lanes or is giving you a help side block. In fact, those stocks numbers are pretty concerning historically. Now you can always attribute some of the lapses to the task that he had offensively in being an 18-year-old freshman, but the lack of physicality and positive flashes make it hard to suggest he'd be significantly better in the future, and I think he could get thrown into actions and targeted by opposing teams.
Mitchell. Baseline feed. Pounded by Pope.
Garcia got free. Coleman shuffles it to Hefner.
Teams in this basketball game.
Grill with a cut to the hoop. Mitchell found him, and he's fouled.
28-16. UConn has had a healthy lead for almost all of this one. But McNeely.
8 points. Texas, none. Here is Chad Baker.
Over on 21% of their possessions. Richard left wide open behind the house screen.
Jimmy, Nate Oates arrived in 2019. Alabama's 71 SEC wins.
Now there were some good moments throughout where the knowledge of his responsibilities were there and he at least competed on the ball. He's also got a plus wingspan, which matters, but he still probably maxes out at being passable given what he's shown so far. If he ends up on a team with good structure and culture, he could exceed that. We've seen stranger things happen, but that would be my expectation.
He was waving his hands, he didn't get it to him. Byline into the paint. He was guarded to bounce shots like that.
And a turnover. Here comes Johnson.
Here's Nelly Davis off the screen. Left his feet, turned it over.
Taylor trying to whistle it inside.
Now Tre is naturally one of those players that has a decent range of outcomes, and similarly in the draft, I wouldn't be surprised to see him go anywhere from like the top 6 down to 13, 14. Offensively, I think he settles in as a good off-ball shooting threat who can fill it up and grows as a playmaker from there. And then defensively, he'll likely have to prove he's not someone that teams can target, and he'll likely match up with the least threatening guards and wings, and I think that could end up being limiting for him as an overall player. Best case, he could be a high-level 2-guard scorer that gets some secondary creation responsibility. He probably doesn't do enough else to get into that next tier of impact, but still very productive. Middle of the road, he's probably a microwave scorer, and then lower end, he's probably a bench shooter, which could still be enough to be in the mix for a rotation spot. Landing spot wise, it is kind of tricky. I like San Antonio. I think they could use his shot making and added playmaking. The rest in his projected range don't really stand out for both sides, but you've got New Orleans, you've got Philly, Dallas. Orlando isn't in the lottery, but I think that would be welcomed. But if he's best player available, it might not matter as much at a certain point. Now in terms of comparisons, best case is probably something like Tyler Hero. He took another jump this season, so it's a higher bar to clear, but there are some real similarities there, even dating back to who Hero was coming out of Kentucky. And then I like Norm Powell in a lot of ways. That's probably my favorite one. And then guys like Alec Burks or Malik Beasley are some others, but That's the general range of who he could resemble. Tre Johnson's game as a shot maker and his production in the SEC as a freshman make his appeal pretty easy to see. Even if some of the physicality and rim pressure keep him from hitting those higher end scoring heights, I think he has enough in the size, shooting, and off-ball game to still carve out a significant role. Now, I'd be more concerned with the defense more than anything else. You'd hope that you can at least cut out the unforced errors and he improves physically, but in this class, I think what he brings is still worth at least a top 10 pick.